321.
It comes up on the screen as 321s, but
Oh,
I prefer ready set go.
Oh, ready, set,
It's
go.
ready set go.
Okay.
Okay, okay. And so let's begin with a April 2022 COVID derangement syndrome update, because we've been living with it now for a couple of years, and it's evolving, and all sorts of amazing things are happening in recent moments. To mention, of course, the whole snake venom mind boggle that was sort of plopped on the plate there a week or so ago, which was pretty interesting. I sort of got into that, but I've certainly stepped back a bit from it after listening to Andrew Kaufman in his expertise of showing, the a really proper way of entering into the research of stuff. So what he presented in that, just to go down that snake venom hole for a moment, is the evidence that was given by Brian Ardis. He then says, oh, well, the mainstay of his evidence was this particular scientific paper. And so he shows you the scientific paper, and he shows you how he reads scientific papers. Because if you watch Terrain, that's one of the big points made in Terrain, is that doctors don't necessarily spend the time and effort or properly know how to read scientific papers. So they rely on like a magazine sort of a scenario that then goes and looks at all those scientific papers and then presents to them what they need to know. So they don't necessarily know firsthand. They know what they've been told to know by another party. That was one of the big points made in that Terrain film. But anyway, the point being, in what he was showing, he's showing how he reads a scientific paper and what he's looking for, And so in doing so, he was able to sort of push the whole snake venomy thing over to one side. Sort of said, well, it's all full of, mites or likes, or, it's like this. It's all a bit airy-fairy. And that was the mainstay of the evidence. There's certainly a lot of circumstantial evidence tying together other dots that supported his theory. But anyway, like you were saying, Luke, that these sorts of things, it's sort of like you could have like white hats deliberately, to some degree, pushing that into the mix to make it even more mind-boggling. And the more mind-boggling it gets, it sort of forces everyone from that, our spiritual journey perspective to go, oh, hang on, like crikey, what is true? And so in that action, you're forced organically into critical thinking. It's become such a labyrinth of possibilities that you got to sit back and try and objectify all those possibilities. Like we were saying last night with the whole Wilcox and Benjamin Fulford and all that. That lad you were talking about, Jordan Sather. It's sort of like we've got getting to that part now that the field of chaos is dense, and a being like him arrives to say, okay, let's just start putting them in categories. That particular, in this giant realm of conspiracy theory, well, you've got all these dudes over here, they've all got sort of alien leanings and all that sort of stuff, and then you've got all of these ones over here that are just... say, like particularly in the COVID derangement syndrome, you've got all sorts of very relevant and very well qualified doctors who are giving you an alternate understanding of what's going on. They're sharing a forensic unpacking, more importantly, of what's going on, and yet they're all the banned ones, and anyone that's following those banned dudes who are giving that sensible, and people no less, like Robert Malone, who was the inventor of the mRNA. So they're significant players in the bigger picture. So it's not as if you just, it was like a Benjamin Fulford or a David Wilcox, some journo somewhere or some book writer somewhere saying, oh, I think it's like this. No, these dudes like Andrew Kaufman, for instance, he's a psychiatrist. He's 10 years in that thing to even become a psychiatrist. And so he's a highly intelligent being delivering very succinct, particularly when you're working with your own critical thinking, your own rationale. Like over this long period of time, you soak in a huge amount of information. There was that Dawn Lester book that I got early in the piece that was interviewed with David Icke, and her 800 pages goes into unpacking germ theory and looking at the physicality of the beings insofar as where did that theory come from, who's responsible for its arrival, what was their support of it during their life, were they still standing by it when they came to the end of their life?
What's their backup and support for it?
Exactly, and yet even though they never continued to support it, yet the whole medical industrial complex is, oh no, we'll have that, thank you, that suits us fine, let's just go and create our whole mega-trillion-dollar industry on going and shooting germs. A good example of understanding that was, well, Dal Bigtree talking about COVID early in the piece, and he had his big desk all set up and he had a 10-kilo bag of rice on the desk. And he says, check this out, and he gets the rice and he pours it all out, and there's got these like a million pieces of rice all over the desk like that. And he says, all of them are germs that you're travelling through every day. And he says, check this out. And then he picks up one of them and he gets a Nico pen and he colours it in and puts it down. He says, that one's COVID. So we're doing all of this because of that one germ, but look at all the rest of them, And so that was germ theory.
I mean, you could potentially put climate change into that same basket of a narrative that was, instigated, fact or fiction, not saying, but then, there's limited scientists allowed to actually publish papers on it, and it's like a controlled narrative,
because that's a perfect point.
There are plenty of scientists out there who have a different view of the scenario, a different take on how carbon in our atmosphere and things like that.
All that physics.
They're all as plausible.
Can you give us an example?
Well, a perfect example
we're not actually
is
allowed to see them anymore or get access to those people or their information.
And so, what have you learned though through that? What's come out as your reality from examining the other side of the research?
I suppose the main point that I'd like to sort of put across today is that we've slowly but surely we've been gradually building up momentum in what I see. It's like an information war, and this war has been going on for a few years now, but it's starting to crank up, and it's a construct. It's an intentional scenario. Whether it's white hats or black hats, whether it's both, to sort of generate. It's a psyop in a way.
Generating a narrative. So they want to have a narrative that everyone, because the narrative is sort of like if you're watching a play or something, you've got the narrator. And so the whole audience is following that particular unfolding in the direction the narrator is taking you. And the narrator is saying, okay, well, this person's here because of that, and this is what they're doing, And so those who control the narrative, and that's why the narrative's so important. And so like in an information warfare, the information warfare is the ones that are endeavouring to command the narrative that everyone's going to follow. And so, what we look at, say, like bring it back to COVID derangement syndrome. So the narrative, the formal narrative is that the virus is real, you will get sick, it's a pandemic, it's dangerous, we've got to have emergency powers, and the only remedy is to be vaccinated. That's the narrative, that's what they stand by, and anything that is counter to that narrative is wiped out. And so they censor and ban everything So that's, you've got all of those medical experts, not just a few, there's a lot of them, presenting forensic unpacking of what their counter narrative is. They're not just saying, no, it's not. They're spending hours telling you why it's not.
So how is it that the majority of people are still following these narratives?
Well, because the narrative wins, because insofar as you've got the government, it is, as most of we are gentle, trusting, innocent beings as a population. And it's sort of like those who we, and I can relate that to my grandmother. My grandmother, like everyone in the system was like you gave your heart to them. And police were like the pillars of society from, growing up with my grandmother and what their sense of the world was. Doctors are like gods. You don't question them.
Yeah.
He says that, you do that without having to think, And so
And
that
news
is
reporters
what,
are close up there as well.
absolutely. And
Journalists.
So just take that line a bit further, the journalist.
Well, I suppose where I'm sort of coming from is that this construct of information, good and bad, correct or incorrect, um, it's one of the beautiful things it's doing is making each individual
question the narrative.
question the narrative, and I suppose ask the question, well, what is the truth? Not saying it's a good thing, not saying it's a bad thing. There is the information war on at the moment. You've got one side wanting to have the truth be exposed, be readily available, be there to be just have information there to be discussed and pondered on and things like that. And you've got another group that are basically just saying, no, this is the narrative and that's it and that's all it's going to be, and we're going to do everything that we possibly can to sustain that. And that narrative is actually starting to fall apart. It's kind of like we kind of know how the bullhorn for the deep state works, in the sense of, oh, look over here, there's a problem over here, and they get the whole world focusing on an incident happening in one part of the world, when actually the real juicy stuff that's going down that they do not want the information getting out on is actually happening just over here. Now that tool has been used
Forever.
forever, and it's kind of like goodies and baddies can use that tool. So I've at this present time, sort of mid-April 2022, it's kind of like we've just recently had Elon Musk up his bid for Twitter, and so it's kind of like, and the whole world is looking at Elon Musk and Twitter. Now, whether Elon Musk is interested in buying Twitter or not, what that's done is it's exposed the Twitter board for who they really are and what the actual agenda is that they're there to maintain the narrative. They're not necessarily there for the shareholders. But what it's also done is taken an enormous amount of our attention. So obviously there's something else going on somewhere else. And so we know that we've got Trump's True Social coming online. I've just seen today that I think it's they've partnered in with BitChute. I think it's either Rumble or BitChute, one of those. I'm sure that it'll probably be both eventually. But just today that they've partnered together. So within this sort of information warfare that we've been in, we're basically now connecting to Great Spirit for us to find our own truth in all of the positive, negatives, narratives,
chaos.
facts, chaos, which has been intentionally created. And it's kind of like for the majority, for a lot of people, it's going to be getting to a point of, I just want the truth. All right? And so, it just so happens that, there's this platform that's just about ready to go on what is being pushed and perceived to be the truth. Now, we're yet to see how that goes, but that's how I sort of see the picture being painted at the moment. And it's possible that, over the last couple of weeks, while Elon Musk's been, chatting to the Twitter board, he might have also, just about concluded his Starlink thing. I know I sort of got this sense that I think Gab went down for a little bit of a while, and I know that True Social sort of slowed down a little bit, and all those sorts of things indicate that they're pulling plugs out of systems and trialling them in other systems, and they're working out, doing all the ironing out, ready to flick the switch, so that they'll be ready to flick the switch
And we'll just go
when they perceive that the moment is right.
So, and your take on that, Pete?
I'd like to go back to the narrative's a very important part of it. And those who have got control of the system, governments and judiciaries and stuff like that, and media, have a greater means of affecting the narrative and pulling it to where they want it, so that they can address those trusting innocent beings like my grandmother who go, oh, okay, that's what it is, that's the truth, And one lovely example I saw of that in recent times, there's a person I know who was working for the government, like indirectly, like on the COVID hotline, and a part of what they were doing were ringing up people who have had their first 2 shots and have yet to have their booster, ringing them up to say, hey, are you going to get your booster? And asking them, if they're not, why they're not. And I just said immediately, I said, well, I'd say because it's not honest. And says, oh, well, that box doesn't exist. There's only 3 boxes there, and that's what they then say, well, all of those people who aren't getting their booster is because of these 3 boxes that we've got over here, but there's all of these other people saying, no, it's because of this or it's because of that. That's all disregarded. So it's a perfect example of the manipulation of data. The data that you don't want can't get in because there's not a box there for it to be ticked against. And so that also, the climate change, all that sort of stuff, the money comes in and says, we want you to research that and show us why that is so. And so if anything's contrary to that, well, you're not getting your money. So all the things that they want to be in the narrative is where all the money gets poured. It's all supported because all those particular scientists and because of the
institution.
Well, because of the way that we as beings are in this mysterious unfolding and the way science is compartmentalized, you can basically get your data to tell you what you want your data to tell you.
So are you saying that people are becoming AI, Pete?
AI, well, artificial intelligence, you could sort of say that, because if you're not truly intelligent, you would be artificially intelligent. And so let's take that back to a spiritual sense. In my simple, gentle understanding of our spiritual path and our being here, you're either journeying because, like in the Bhagavad Gita, all that sort of suggesting, well, it's your ego that is the Godhead. And so you've come from your infinite inner infinity in your connection to Source, come out, and as soon as you come out into the shared external infinity, well, hey presto, you have to wear your ego. It's sort of like your diving suit to come into that infinity. And so that ego comes out and goes, oh, check it all out. Oh, I want some of that. Oh, I'm going to put on these because I look like that. And so you can have the ego sort of become separated from the source from which it came, so a separated ego, or there's the other egos come out and go, oh, and then they're remembering their connection to source, and I call that a soul-centered ego. And so there's that two things going on. And so artificial intelligence could be the intelligence worn by the separated ego.
Yeah.
Another thing that we can look at to, sniff that out is in our being soul-centered and going, I don't know what all the fuss is. Like, why do you have to go and spend billions of dollars making spacesuits to go up there? Like, if we trained ourselves up, we could just sit here in the chair, go into meditation, and I'd be up there. Wait for the alignment. That's why all the astronomers were so focused on alignments, because that was the perfect time to travel there astrally. And so you've got that whole world of separated ego then sort of saying, oh, we want to live forever. Well, all the soul-centered blood say, well, fuck off, we already do. We're already immortal, you dickhead. And they're all like this, oh no, let's live forever. Let's go and, like get Walt Disney's head and put it in a freezer. And then in a few years' time, we can put it on another thing and he can come back to life. Or, let's go transhumanism, and then we can eventually hold our consciousness on a chip and we can live forever. So you dickheads, you're already living forever. You're already immortal. And so it's sort of like they've got this artificial intelligence, as Eckhart Tolle would say, like intelligent idiots. Like you have to be absolutely supremely intelligent to use physics in a way where you can split the atom and make a bomb, but you're an idiot for doing it.
Yeah.
And so there's so many realms of our existence you can see intelligent idiots. And so for that artificial intelligence, if you sort of go back to that separated ego, soul-centered ego, the separated ego is sort of artificial in its intelligence because it's disconnected from source. It's in the mainstream academia and science has no creator in creation. It's a mechanical universe. So if you go to Walter Russellian science, and where the creator is wholly a part of the way of perceiving the physics, the science of the physics, it's a different, it's much more, like for people like us, we go, oh yeah. And so, but our mainstream formal, it's sort of like it's been designed to, like if you go back to like the whole Christianity thing, in that narrative of the Christianity, it identified the unjust steward. That was the parable of the unjust steward. And the unjust steward was Mammon. And Mammon is the son of the devil. And so the unjust steward is those who are in a position of trust to steward our collective organs. So the collective organ of justice, the collective organ of government, all of those are the collective organ of our medical system. It's sort of like it's there to serve we as a species and our health as individual cells of that organism, but it isn't doing it justly. It's there, like that Max Egan presentation on the rising from the mud of Tartaria rising from the mud thing is made some beautiful points in that, just showing how everything. He said if a society was truly set up, and that's what he was sort of saying about what they perceive of that Tartar society, everything that they did was there to honour and support the life of the beings. Whereas in our construct, everything's there to support profit. There's a complete disconnect from serving our life and our being alive and our sharing existence in the mystery of the unfolding of creation.
I mean, you've got I suppose, like the Bill Mollison, the permaculture take on that of our, as a permaculturalist, an understanding of the word sustainability. And so, when we're doing workshops and things like that, I sort of start off with, okay, what is the definition of sustainable? Okay, perpetuation, it goes on for ever and ever and ever, and then it's kind of, well, what do we here as humanity on planet Earth, what do we have as sustainable systems? Are there any man-made ones, or what have we got as the example of a sustainable system? And what Bill pointed out was that it's our ecosystems, our natural ecosystems. It's our reefs, it's our forests, and so it's kind of like, therefore, it's like, your closest national park is actually your university for sustainability. Everything you want to learn and know about sustainability is unfolding right in front of your eyes when you sit in the forest. And so our connection with nature and our connection with spirit is potentially the intelligence, and anything that is not of that is potentially the artificial intelligence, if you know what I mean. So it's kind of like, I think that just pretty much supports what Pete was saying there.
And so, remedy. How do you both see?
Sit in the forest.
How do you both see it going forward from here? Like, what are your predictions? Because this is interesting that we're documenting all this as we go. So, what are your predictions for the immediate future with how you see it going? We'll start with you, Pete.
I like to relate my my own journey as a living soul, having an experience in this dimension, to the whole of everything I'm looking at, because it's all a projection of me, as some wise others suggest. So instead of being anti-Biden or pro, all that sort of stuff, that's just me projected out on the screen trying to figure out the mystery, and so it's useful for me to then figure out what I'm doing, where I'm going, what's my purpose, what do I want to achieve and enjoy, up to the point where I either drop off the perch or who knows, like with all of this amazing stuff out there, ascension is also not crossed off the list, like everything's so possible that you could quite possibly just go to the right, I don't know, thought frequency and then just blip out.
And your understanding of ascension?
From a Taurian Capricorn moon, very earthy, practical, it's simply rise above. So the very work of your day to day is there's plenty of things that you can rise above. It could be just a scenario unfolding with another person, and in that you can observe the dynamics of your commerce and go, oh, I'm being a bit of a dick there or whatever, I can rise above that. They're being a bit of a dick, I can rise above that, And so that is the work. It's sort of like climbing up a cliff face, and every little thing that happens in every day is an opportunity to rise above something, rise above something that you don't like doing. I don't like doing the dishes, but I'll rise above that, and I'm actually going to be committed, and I'm going to enjoy this, whatever it is, And so there's always opportunity to rise above. So without trying to figure out what actually happens, like, am I just going to sort of go quivery and blue, and then all of a sudden it's like someone's turned the switch and I'm not there anymore? Who knows? That might be it. Or I might have to, fold backwards like some of those great photos for those people that like to, and you sort of like your head goes up your own bum, and then you turn inside out and you're not there. Like, who knows? But the work of getting to wherever it is that we don't know where we're going is to continually rise above, rise above.
Going up.
And yours, Luke, with all your study and research into black hats and white hats and what's going on with Trump, with releasing the new free media, what are you foreseeing coming up in your research?
Like, as in the immediate future, the next 12 months, I see a lot more chaos.
Yep.
But through that chaos, it's like for me, 2022 is very much a revelation year.
A lot more revealing.
Exposing stuff. So it's like in the big picture, I sort of feel that we're in a controlled narrative, and that narrative is to bit by bit bring the the people population of the world up to speed with the reality of some of the shit that's been going on over the last few thousand years, for like a quantum number of people, that 100th monkey, whatever, to flip over to go, okay, enough's enough, so that then the good guys can step in with support from the majority of the people on the planet to start cleaning up the mess that's been created. I also believe that the intensity of the mess and the chaos is going to increase and it's primarily for that purpose, is to make it easier for people to actually see some of the potential unjusts that they've been living in and that have been masquerade, and that as those truths or as those realities become more obvious, more people are present to it, change will be a lot smoother. When we understand that potentially one side of the story is wanting to create division, we then, as intelligent human beings, go, okay, unity is our main focus. So that then with that, as that unity builds, the transition becomes a lot easier.
And that unity builds one individual at a time. That's how I've understood the whole Aquarian thing, that our transformation of our species will be a self-correction. And the self-correction happens from each self. So all of those beings that are, say, out in the systems that determine what we're doing and construct the narrative, they will be beings in there going, hang on, there's something not quite right here. I think I'm going to step away from it. I'm going to auto-correct because what's going on here isn't correct. There's dishonesty, and the good example.
You're rising above it.
Yeah, the good example is the whole vaccine agenda. When you put that into perspective, how does the government want to commerce with our will in regards we conforming with what they want us to do? So far, I've not seen any presentation of, like, they've spent $1 trillion or more across the planet. So why don't we have, the internet's there, you could have a totally dedicated internet channel that is giving a blow-by-blow, day-by-day informed consent, going in, giving you a forensic unpacking of the entire science and all the facts of what mRNA is about, educating us all to understand all of its mechanics and why it's good. We have a forensic integrity audit of all the beings who are behind it, all the corporations and the politicians and all that sort of stuff. An ongoing forensic, day by day, you can tune into that channel. Oh, where's our forensic integrity audit up to today? A absolutely, completely honest register of all those who are having an adverse effect, all those that have died from it, all those that have got remedy, so it's not agreeing with their system, what remedies exist to get that back out of them. So
including
none of
those
that
died within 14 days of getting their second jab.
There's so much dishonesty. But instead of seeing that, what we do see is coercion of our will. So we're coerced through, there was bribery.
Grooming, I think it's called.
Yeah, grooming. Bribery in the first instance. Oh, come to Las Vegas and you can go to this strip club for free if you get jabbed. Go to Disneyland for free. If you get
Donuts.
jabbed, get donuts, get beer.
Coffee in
Vax
Canberra.
a Million. There was a lottery. If you got Vax, you could go into the Vax a Million and win $1 million.
And
So
Canberra,
bribery.
coffee. They gave free
That's
coffee
right.
to vaccinated
So
people
that's
in
the
Canberra.
coercion of will through bribery. Okay, the next level down. Coercion of will through blackmail. No jab, no job. That's blackmail. Then you've got coercion of will through threats of violence and intimidation. So we've been flooded with a lot of people's phone footage of the behaviour of police in this last 2 years, enough to get the vibe that they are willing to use intimidation and violence, and nothing's corrected. So any of those cops out there that have done some really shit stuff, I bet you they're still at work.
Oh no,
Which
a few
means
media
that
outlets have suggested that they would like to behave better.
that's right.
Nice.
But meaning that is the will and the intent of the government. So unless it's going in and dramatically correcting that behaviour, it condones that behaviour, and it is its behaviour. So we've got that. We've got bribery, we've got blackmail, we've got intimidations and threats and violence, and we've got censorship and banning. So anything that's contrary to the narrative is censored, banned, vilified, so they're a villain, or demonised, or made fun of. Oh, you're just a conspiracy theorist. Oh, you're just an anti-vaxxer. All that sort of stuff. So without honouring in that first instance, so like what is the honour of commerce of will? If I'm wanting you to put that stuff in you, I would give you every piece of information possible so that you are able to make a truly informed consent decision. Well, that doesn't exist. We've been able to witness, I've been with my daughter, they losing her job with the fire service. And so go to the doctor, but the doctor's not able to give her informed consent, and she doesn't, want to have it. He can't give her an exemption because of all of this blah. And so it was a big ping pong game. So as she's exploring, okay, let's see what the informed consent is. So then eventually when Pfizer released all of its documents, and there was the 9 pages of 1,291 adverse events of special interest, she copied that all out and then plonked that on the desk in front of her doctor, and he says, oh, you'll have to go to your union. I can't do
And so
anything for you.
just for interest's sake, when did that get revealed? What was happening in the world when Pfizer revealed all of that information?
That was about end of February, I think.
So what was happening in Ukraine around that time?
That's when
That was probably the beginning
yeah,
of it.
Yeah, let's have a distraction. Let's take the focus off what's happening over here and let's look over here.
And can you tell us a bit, Luke, about what's happening in Ukraine, the truth behind what's happening there, what that narrative's about in your understanding? One of the notions.
Quite simply is Putin is just reclaiming what's rightfully his and what the people of Ukraine
Want.
And in the process, he's doing a bit of spring cleaning of dirt.
There's a gang of naughty kids.
There's quite a bit of dirt in Ukraine that needs tidying up, and people can do their own research into what's that. But there's biolabs linked to Doherty Institute in Victoria, in Ukraine. There's certainly money laundering happening there. More than likely, the human trafficking, tunnels underground, blood. The same old story that, I can't say most people sort of understand now about the deep underground military bases and tunnels that slowly but sure, are being cleaned up. The dirt in the world is being tidied up. I think Bendigo or Ballarat just recently had another little tremor about 10 k's down underneath the Leviathan mine. So it's happening. There's little cleanups happening all over the world. NATO was getting a bit too close to Russia's border, so Putin, it's been brewing for years and years and
Decades.
decades, and Putin's basically just sort of said, okay, no, that's enough. I'm
Draw the line.
Um, basically the only support that Zelensky, because I'm very cautious about saying Ukraine, because the Ukraine people are different to the Ukrainian army. The Ukrainian army are potentially, causing atrocities on the Ukrainian people, and then they're blaming it on Russia doing it, and so that's been happening in Ukraine for decades. Nothing's changed. Well, it's changing now. It's changing now because that's being eradicated, being removed, and it has to be removed.
And we'll wrap it up. So, final words from each of you about anything you want
Well,
to share.
some of the points that weren't continued to be made, but yeah, certainly the prediction is that there's going to be more and more revelation. There's going to be more and more leverage for more and more people to activate the antennas of their soul.
Yes.
And so it's going to make people come out of, in that simple analogy, come out of separated ego into soul-centered ego. And how I understand that soul-centered ego coming into play is that the antennas of your soul, you become consciously aware of using them. And so the antennas of your soul are your critical thinking, your discriminating wisdom, and your humour, as my take on it. And so once they're brought back in and you're using them, you're sort of separate from it all, but at the same time, you are a part of it all. That to me is that awakening of being a part of the unity of the whole organism, but we're all in this particular organism of humanity, individuated cells. Not individual cells all in an organ, we're individuated, which means that we're separate but a part of. And so at a soul level, in our collective spiritual journey, we've got to shake all the shackles of Pisces off as we come into the clear thinking of Aquarius. And so in that construct, as we were talking about with the alchemy of 9 dimensions, that 6th dimension of geometry and stuff, which is existing above the 5th dimension. So if we sort of think of the 5th dimension as just pure, beautiful love and cooperation, intelligent cooperation, consideration, everything that supports and promotes our enjoying our life adventure. But for that to happen, there's a construct that is needed. And so that's why it's suggested in Barbara Hand Clow, like the yoga, sacred geometry, all that sort of stuff. So sacred geometry is a great example. It's either all the 3 points joined together in the particular, and then it's a triangle. It can't not be a triangle. So that particular law is very obvious. If you want to get a 5-pointed star perfectly put into place, you've got to do it like that. There's only one way. One way of being right and a million ways of being wrong. And so that fidelity of order, example by sacred geometry, we can also have in the law of our commerce. And that's what I sort of see emerging out of our species, is that particularly, in our following the quantum language thing, to me, that is a high fidelity of correctness that's indisputable. It's like a geometry. And because it's there, but it's also in that beautiful Aquarian way, the beings that have brought it out and shared it in a very organic, authentic way, just say, check out these fools. Like they've all sort of been not necessarily demonized, but made to look like nutters. And so to me, that was the perfect sign that it was Aquarian energy, because the divine fool is what's coming in. All the fools are endeavoring, as an individuated cell of the organism, all of the fools are endeavoring to become divine fools, to awaken, And so in that, certain fools arrive and chuck on the table, say, check this out. this'll, like this is geometry.
And all the fish want to keep swimming together in a big school and hang out together and just go round and round in circles.
Yeah, in the same narrative, in the same thought, in the same purpose, all in the same uniforms, all fighting the same wars, all that sort of stuff. Once we've sort of climbed out of that Piscean age, and in the moments to come, there won't be bodies of people out there in uniforms, all like that. It will be just a gentle, fun, villagey.
It's almost like they're 2D beings, and so in 2D it's just linear, it's just straightforward, and yet when Barbara Hand Cloud talks about the second dimension, she says that that's where you go for the healing of Earth. And so Earth brings balance back in by releasing viruses, by releasing bacteria, by shaking the Earth to balance it. So it's almost like these beings in their 2D form are triggering the balance that needs to happen. The removal of the trafficking, the removal of the Illuminati, the removal of the black hats. Yet they're the ones doing it.
Yes.
It's like in
But it's like in ourselves, if we've got that battle going on, like say you're dealing with cancer or some dramatic illness, all of the cells in your organism are needing to deal with that. And so we, as a species, are in that same scenario. We've got these diseases in our collective body that, parts of us that represent the immune system are coming to address. But, is there a mind virus in the stewarding of that? So meaning that we've got our immune system in the form of militaries and police. They're our immune system. And so what is commanding that immune system?
And ethical NGOs.
Hey?
And ethical NGOs.
And so that immune system, what commands it? And so the immune system, say like what we're understanding from some of the information that's coming from the whole COVID narrative, is that they're suggesting that those that have had multiple jabs could quite possibly end up with vaccine-induced AIDS, so autoimmune deficiency. And so that it's sort of like something else is commanding their immune system to not bring them back into health and vitality, but to take them out. And so that's the example I'm using. So meaning that our immune systems in our militaries and our polices, what's commanding it? Is it an autoimmune disease in the steward that is commanding that immune system to take us out? Or is it there truly as to bring health and healing and vitality? So that going back to that Christian narrative of Mammon, the unjust steward, so those beings have a sacred duty and trust to sit in those offices as officers of our collective organs, of our collective social body, to steward life. But in that separated ego command of that, it's not stewarding life, it's stewarding profit. And so it's sort of like, it's like a tumour. The tumour is wanting all of that energy to grow bigger. It doesn't serve the organism that it's a part of. It's actually a foreign, life-threatening chunk of tissue. And so it's in command, and it's been able to say, I want all that life force. So it's like using government back to front. So government is there taxing everything instead of feeding everything, nourishing every single cell of the organism to come into full life, and arresting the cells of the organism that are overnourished and becoming corrupt. So there's all of that profit system overnourishes cells and corrupts them. So all of the, not all, but so many of the beings that are full of more dollars than they can count, more apartment buildings and everything else, are corrupted away from their connection to source.
In nature, too much of an unused product is referred to as pollution. And that's sort of similar to what Pete's saying there, is that when you have too much of something, it's a negative. It becomes a negative. If you can't actually utilise it.
It has to be utilised,
If you can't utilise it.
It has to nourish something, otherwise it becomes.
Otherwise
And so let's end the podcast on
Yep.
remedy, on a high note, on remedy for what we're going through. For those, especially for those
Yeah,
sort of
simple
near
remedy
awakening.
is just dealing with your own path and your own
Get your
commerce.
spiritual house in order.
Yeah, spiritual house in
Get your spiritual
order,
house in order.
and then you're projecting that healing of yourself. You're projecting into the healing of the organism. Not my word. That's what I've drawn from listening to all sorts of amazing,
Faith.
intelligent.
Faith. Remedy, faith.
Mm.
Pretty simple.
Nice.
Yep.
Mm.
And grow a bit of your
Yeah.
own food. Grow your
Very nice. There we go.
Yeah.
Nice one. Far out. Covered so much.